good morning to everybody in the room, good morning to people in the same time zone, and good afternoon, good evening to people who are joining us from further afield. I'd like to do two things with you this morning. The first thing I'd like to do is set the scene. We all come at it at digital platforms from different angles, so I'd like to bring everybody together around, some definitions, some thoughts about platforms. And the second thing I'd like to do is share with you some more recent developments, some interesting things that maybe were not, front of mind only a couple of years or a couple of months ago, and that are now shaping the platform economy. But first of all, I'm going to ask you all to step back. And when I say step back, I mean step back, and step back in time. So if you look at the slide behind me, or actually on both sides, this is the value created per capita, so per person, the economic value on the planet over the past 2,000 years. And you could go back actually 30,000 years if you wanted to. It's the same chart. Basically, economic growth, which is something that happens around 1800, is a relatively recent phenomenon. So what happens around 1800? Anybody? Industrial Revolution. Heard it. Absolutely. And it happens, I was about to say in this very room, sort of. It happens in this country. And what is at the heart of the Industrial Revolution? The modern firm. So the modern firm has been masterfully captured by Michael Porter. It's a value chain. It's a linear process. And what a better room than this one to talk about value chains. I mean, this is exactly what it looks like. You're in a factory, you've got employees, and you've got raw material coming in, and you manufacture things here. You've got massive engines that are being manufactured, and that's a production process that has been at the heart of our economies for many, many years. So it's a perfect representation of the Industrial Revolution in action. But I don't know if you noticed, the last chart I showed stopped in 2000. And in fact, over the past 20 years, that growth has not only continued, but it has accelerated. So the economic value, on average, created by every single person on the planet is increasing. And we went from 500, which was the baseline, to 6,500 roughly in 2000. And in 2020, I think we were around $18,000 per capita. So massive growth that has continued. But it has been powered by a slightly different type of firms. So again, if you look, and 2000 is not so long ago, but if you look back 2000, the largest companies in the world in 2000 are very well-known companies. General Electric, still at the top, largest company in the world in terms of market capitalization in 2001. And in 2000, it was just value chains. All the companies in black are traditional businesses with value chains. And I mean, General Electric had been a large company for a long time. I think it was one of the constituting members of the Dow Jones in 1986 or something like that. So these are large firms established. And actually, the picture behind me, I read the little thing, is a General Electric factory in Birmingham. So this is, we are there. This is what was at the top of the rankings in terms of companies, and that is what powered the Industrial Revolution pretty much until 2000. And then we see a new type of company emerging. They're in green on the chart, and we see Microsoft emerging in 2001, 2006. You still have Microsoft. 2011, you see Apple being in the top 5, and then for the first time in 2016, you see that the 5 largest companies in the world are powered by something that is not just a value chain. It's something else. It's a platform business model, and that's what we're going to talk about. And when we talk about platforms, one thing we've learned is that definitions are very important. Lady Gaga has got platform shoes with thick soles, and so we're not going to talk about these kinds of platforms. And you can talk about oil platforms, you can talk about political platform, etc. Even in business, you've got lots of definitions. And it's very important for people to converge towards a definition in order to formulate a strategy. So we've spent a lot of time thinking about the good definitions. And if you look at these businesses that have created unique value, what they do that is really unique compared to the others is that they attract participants in their ecosystem. They match them, connect them, and they enable them to transact. And that's the magical thing about platforms. Effectively, they are uniquely able to harness the energy of the participants within the ecosystem. You know, all the apps in the app stores, all the sellers in the marketplace, etc. So when you apply that lens, you'll find that all the marketplaces are types of platforms. You can have a product marketplace. eBay is the quintessential example. You'll find that service marketplaces are also platforms. Upwork, for those of you who know that, you can get help with your website and so on and so forth. Lots of freelance people on these types of platforms. You could run things, Airbnb, etc. Lots of different platforms that are marketplaces. Card networks often have the same characteristics. You need a critical mass of people with cards in their pockets, merchants accepting cards. You need to connect them, match them, and enable them to transact. Social networks, of course, do that with content. I think we've got people from Meta and TikTok in the room, probably, and also online. And app stores are a bit like marketplaces for digital goods. So they've got the same characteristics. And these are very powerful business models, but they do not work like value chains. And that's something that is very important because everybody has got the mental model of the value chain that has been so powerful. So how do platforms work? Well, actually, the definition is quite helpful. They attract people. You've got a rocket, what we call the rocket model, that shows that you have to attract people on both sides. So you've got two sides, at least, in a platform, and therefore you have two value propositions. And you no longer have suppliers on one side and clients on the other. You have two types of clients, what we call producers and users. And you need a critical mass of each of them to match them. Think about a dating website. You need a critical mass of people participating. You need to match them. You need to connect them so that they can exchange information. And ultimately, platforms enable transactions between the participants. And platforms optimize that ecosystem. So it's a totally different way of thinking. Suddenly, you no longer have stock. You don't control the people who create the value. In this environment here, everybody's an employee. You're part of an organization. You're in a closed environment. This is a factory. When you're in the platform world, it's outside of the boundaries of the firm, and you need to orchestrate this. And to orchestrate that ecosystem, you need to do things that traditional firms don't have to do in some ways. You need to develop the right governance principles. So because these people don't work for you, the people who co-create the value with you and are part of your ecosystems are not necessarily your employees anymore. So you need governance principles so that you decide who is allowed to join the platform, what they're allowed to do on the platform, how value is shared on the platform. You also need to create trust. One of the main objectives of platform businesses is to create trust. They need to create trust in the concept of the platform itself. So if you're launching a ride-sharing platform, people need to be convinced about ride-sharing as being something that they have trust in. You need to convince people and create trust at the level of your platform itself, its brand. So if you're BlaBlaCar in France, you need to create trust at the level of BlaBlaCar as a company. And ultimately, the platform needs to create trust at the level of the participants. So the person you're going to share a car with for 8 hours when you drive from Paris to Marseille needs to be something that you trust, somebody that you trust. So you need to do things that will create trust at all these layers. And you need the right type of brand. And again, it's no longer a brand that is optimized and needs to resonate just with your clients. It's a brand that needs to work with the entire ecosystem. So both sides of your platform, maybe more, if you have more sides on your platform. So that's a very quick, and clearly you have other things that are very important. We're going to talk about that as well, in terms of scalable infrastructure, in terms of user experience end-to-end that works well for everybody, payment flows, and we're going to touch upon that in the various panels we have today. I'm trying to make up a little bit of time, so I'll go quickly. And if you want to learn more, as Francois said, there is this excellent book on platforms. This is the first edition. There's a new edition next year, so this is your last chance to grab a collector. We've got a few copies here. This will be a vintage very soon, so do get one before you leave. And for those of you online, I think we've got some cartoons as well. And actually, we have cartoons here as well. So feel free to help yourselves if you want a quick refresher on platform businesses. So that's it for setting the scene. Now, I just want to spend a couple of minutes about things that are quite new, quite emerging in the platform world, and quite interesting. I'm going to talk very briefly about platform-powered ecosystems, B2B platforms, the circular economy, emerging regulations, and new tech. Platform-powered ecosystems is a concept. I think we were the first one to use the term in the book. And what we thought was starting to happen and going to happen was that traditional businesses that had value chains would start adding platform businesses to their existing capabilities. And we see that more and more often, and we've been part of that journey. We've helped a number of clients and firms over the years develop these capabilities. And I'll just take an example because you want to make these concepts come to life. We did quite a lot of work with a large DIY group, and it's just an example, but this is happening across industries. And this is basically people who have chains of shops and they sell things, tiles and hammers and nails. And suddenly, when you apply a platform lens to these businesses, you can add a product selection so that when something is not in stock, they can get it on a product marketplace. So they get a long tail, they get choice. So a product platform is a helpful addition to these types of businesses. And then they realize that you've got different peoples who are clients, you've got professionals, craftsmen, painters, electricians, plumbers, coming to your shops, and you've got people who have projects. People buy hammers and nails, usually not because they love hammers and nails, but because they have projects. And you could actually bring these people together. So you can create a service platform so that you match, you attract, you match, you connect, and you enable these people to make transactions. So suddenly you can find a plumber, you can find an electrician, and you've got a service platform. And that's strengthening the entire ecosystem of the business. And last, lots of people need help with DIY. I know I do. And video is a life-saving thing if you can find the right video at the right time for the right product or the right exercise. So if you want new floorboards, etc., a content platform is incredibly useful. And suddenly, you have surrounded your business with platforms, and you are starting to orchestrate an ecosystem. And that's very powerful because when you start to be a bit more ambitious, and you're like, okay, what about net zero? And how can we help people insulate their house? And suddenly you can connect with the financial helps of the government, and you can get the people you already have on your platforms who do work, electricians, plumbers, etc. And you can create value propositions at the ecosystem level that are very powerful. So that's the kind of journey that we see. I'm using one example, but it's working in lots of different industries. So very interesting development. We sort of predicted it a few years ago and hoped it would happen, but now it's really a reality. B2B marketplaces. When we wrote the book a few years back, most marketplaces were C2C, so consumer to consumer. So think eBay in the early days. Lots of collectors, people buying, selling coins and stamps. And Pez dispensers, for those of you who are old enough to remember the early eBays. Broken laser pointer was apparently one of the very first things that got sold on eBay. So very much a C2C model. Amazon and others entered the market, and it switched to more of a B2C model, so you could buy from businesses online. More recently, we've seen really the emergence of lots of B2B models. And they're not visible because they're not consumer brands. But in chemicals, in agriculture, if you want to rent buses commercially, and lots of platforms are removing the efficiencies of the traditional value chains that we had before. So that's not something that is super visible, but that's a big and interesting trend, and it's happening, really around the world. The third trend I'd like to talk to you about briefly is the circular economy. Now, one of the fundamental issues of the traditional linear value chain business was that it was not sustainable. It was not designed to be sustainable. It was predicated upon infinite availability of fossil fuel type energy. It doesn't take waste into account, so it's not efficient in that way. So the circular economy is becoming incredibly important, of course, and platforms are uniquely able to power these models. If you want to share, if you want to reuse, if you want to recycle, if you want to refurbish things, platforms are the model that can do that. Very often we see people still applying the value chain model to these problems, but it's very difficult to solve with a value chain. It's much easier to solve with a platform business. So we see a majority of projects, actually. I think more than half of the projects we work on now have got a very, very strong sustainability dimension in terms of platforms. And the other half that don't always have that at the forefront of their design, we make sure that they end up with a very strong sustainability dimension by the time we are finished with them. So very, very important, and we spent a bit of time with one of the leading French entrepreneurs, Frédéric Mazzella, over COVID to write a book about BlaBlaCar. It's a company he founded. It's a car-sharing company, and one of the messages of the book is, this is how you can start from a blank page of paper and scale a platform to 100 million plus members in a sustainable way. So very important development. The last thing I say, and that's quite encouraging, but for the first time, you can see that economic growth, is, in some countries at least, starting to decorrelate from carbon emissions. So some countries are now able to grow more sustainably, and that's clearly what we want to happen across the world, and platforms are a key part of the answer. Very quickly, regulations. I mean, we've got a panel that will focus on this, but that's a very interesting development. Again, when we wrote the book, you had no platform-specific regulations. So unlike banking or telecoms and all that, clearly platforms had to abide by the rule of law, but you didn't have any regulations that were tailored and focused specifically on platforms. This is changing. We now have new regulations. The DMA, the DSA, for example, in Europe. It's coming also to the UK. And we've got experts who are some of the architects of these regulations that will be with us to talk about these changes. But this is quite important and quite fundamental because it protects customers, but at the same time, platforms have also been able to innovate in an unregulated environment. And clearly, you want to keep this innovation potential, but you want to make sure that consumers are protected at the same time. So we'll talk a little bit about this balancing act and how you can ensure that these ecosystems remain open in that process. So interesting times on the regulatory front. Now the last slide and last thing I want to share with you is technology. We'll talk a little bit more about this. Everybody's talking about AI. I know I am as well, and spending quite a lot of time playing with all these new tools. I was talking about the recent OpenAI announcement this week of their new App Store and their new product set, and it's quite fascinating. You can develop your own AI. yourself without coding, giving a personality that you describe using natural language, and this is clearly going to change lots of things. But we shouldn't forget that these technologies do not exist in a vacuum, and they combine. So you also have blockchain, and you also have smart contracts, and you also have virtual reality and the metaverse. And sure, they don't develop at the same pace, but they will combine, and we see the emergence of very interesting things. Now, people use technology in two different ways, typically. One is to improve the productivity of what they're doing. So when you have new technology, you become more efficient, and this is great, and everybody is going to do that. So value chains will benefit from new technology and productivity gains brought about by AI. Platforms will benefit as well. But the second thing that technologies allow you to do is also to develop new business models. So in the same way as platforms were able to harness the power of the web tech stack and create a new business model that became quite powerful, these new technologies are starting to show the potential of new types of organizations. And I think we've got people this afternoon, I think in the academic on the academic panel, talking about decentralized platforms and how you can think about decentralized autonomous organizations. It's a very interesting development. So that's it from me, and I think I'm handing back to François.
Thank you so much, Benoit.
Thank you.